Hey everyone, what's up? Blue here again with another recap video. Today ended day 2 of the MSI event, which was the conclusion of the play-in bracket between the PML and the PCL teams. Now, if you didn't watch yesterday, just to quickly recap, all of the PCL console teams lost to the Paladins minor league teams from the PC side of the gaming universe. So today we had the semifinals and the finals of the play-in bracket. Remember, the top 2 teams from this bracket, first and second place, go into the main bracket with the top 6 PPL teams, and whoever wins the play-in bracket is the number 1 of those 2 teams, and they would go up against the number 2 team, which is Nadas Vincere or Navi, and NIP or Ninjas in Pajamas, being the number 1 PPL seed, will face the number 2 team that comes out of the play-in bracket. So to start it all off, we had EU versus NA matchups on both sides of the brackets, and the first match today was Sour Team versus Sanguine Esports. And Sanguine, they looked really dominant yesterday, and they had a very DPS heavy mindset. You know, you have Neo and Edgem, and they just looked fantastic yesterday. And then you have Sour Team from the EU team, and they didn't look as good yesterday. They still looked good. They're still able to 3-0 elevate the console team, but not in as dominant fashion as Sanguine was able to take down Flashpoint. So, you know, going into this, a lot of people were thinking Sanguine would have a very good chance to take down an EU PML team. So Sanguine was the number 1 PML team out of the North American region, and Sour Team was the number 2 team coming out of PML EU. And the first game was on Splitstone Quarry, and Ninu from Sour Team on the Mave was just fantastic. He was doing everything he needed to do. They also ran triple DPS and Edgem. That last pick for them, they were able to take that Leon. Now, for the side of Sour Team, they elected to take the Genos first. They also had a Tyra, an Eevee, and a Mave to be the triple DPS comp with that. They were able to grab the Barrack as well. So that's a good solo tank, especially with that Genos. You know, you don't really want to do that with a Nara. So that was a really good draft from the side of Sour Team. Sanguine, though, did have a really good draft as well. They had Bomb King for Neo, which he's dominant on. They had Leon for Edgem. But unfortunately, with a Mave, you know, Leon can deal with Mave. They also had an Eevee. Leon can deal with Eevee. But when you have both of them coming for Leon at the same time, plus that Genos Luminary damage amp to both of them, you know, it's going to get very overwhelming. So Edgem had a very tough time into that triple DPS comp. Plus you have the Tyra Mark giving another damage boost as well as a reveal. So it got very, very difficult for the side of Edgem on the Leon, trying to keep those 3 in check. And Flame Effects, his con was really lacking throughout the entire set, actually. He played it in Game 1 and Game 2. Now, Game 3, they did take the con again, but they gave it to Jay Lin this time. And Flame Effects had to play I think it was the Atlas. Have the drafts? Yeah, so he had to play the Atlas. They drafted the con and the Atlas. That was actually a really nice draft from Sanguine as well in Game 3. That was on Jaguar Falls. And they were able to put up a fight. They ended up losing that game 4-2. But taking the Vivian and the Drogos with their 4th and 5th pick for Sanguine was a very good thing, because on the other side you have Tyra and you have Bomb King, and you have Barrack. You know, Barrack's probably going to go... Barrack's a projectile when he goes tinkering, and he's probably going to go that. You have Makoa as a projectile as well. Genos a little bit, but on Jag Falls, he's kind of, you know, hiding out behind some walls and getting some heals in. So it just leaves Tyra and Bomb King, which isn't that great, against this Drogos, and that was a great draft. The Vivian was there to bust through shields from Makoa and Barrack as well. And Con and Atlas are just 2 really good off tanks. But unfortunately, Leon and Cassie banned from Sour. Then they picked Tyra. Perdo was really able to create a lot of space with that. Plus, Sanguine, I don't know what was going through their heads. I think, you know, maybe they had a certain game plan. Midway through that game, they should have known that their game plan wasn't working. First round, they come out. It's 80%, 87% on the capture without first blood, by the way. So Sour Team was 87% capture compared to Sanguine's 0%, and there was still no first blood. So a lot of fight was getting drawn out there. So no big things. But round 1, Sour used their ults and had the push, but left point for pressure and couldn't touch. So they got a little over aggressive there for a second or two, and it ended up costing them. So it became a 1-1 game at that point. Round 2, Sanguine didn't touch again until Sour had 93% on the objective. And round 3, 99%, Sanguine did not touch the point again. And when they ended up doing so, they stalled it, forced the overtime. They did get 3% on the objective for themselves, but then they were wiped pretty much after that. They had to touch point with only 3 or 4 members still alive, so it was very difficult for them to, once they touch point, to kind of win the team fight or change the team fight the slightest bit and try and win the point capture. But they didn't touch point until Sour team capped all 3 rounds, okay? And first round, Sanguine didn't touch until it was 87%, okay? They didn't touch point the second round until it was 93%. And then they didn't touch the point round 3 until it was 99%. That's either they didn't adjust to their game and say, hey, you know, us trying to fight off point and get some picks is really not working right now because it hasn't been successful 2 rounds in a row and we've let them just sit on point for that long. Or it could be Sour team was really, really good at being able to zone them off of point and not allow them to even come in to put some pressure onto those tanks for the side of Sour team. So it was a really good play by Sour team. Flame Effects con ults, by the way. I know this was a big topic on the broadcast. So here's the actual stats for it. Game 1, he threw out 5 overpowers. He hit 1 of them, and he got 0 kills. And that one that he did get, he ended up dying while that person was in their hand. That was at the top right there on the ramp of the big house on Splitstone Quarry. Game 2, he played con again. He threw out 4 overpowers. 2 of them connected. 1 of them was a kill. That was at the end of the round on defense when he threw Ash off of the map with 1 second, or it was in overtime. He threw Sheepa, who was playing Ash. He threw him off the map. So I don't think that was needed. I'm pretty clearly stated as well. So that was the one time he got a kill. The other time that it did connect for a successful ult but didn't kill anyone was the one where they were pushing the payload and they were able to he was able to throw Barrack all the way back to where the capture point is. So that was a good ult because that's a long way for Barrack to have to walk back from. So that one we will give to him. The Ash one did get a kill, but for what? It's overtime. You guys they were actually up in that team fight 5v4, and another Sour team member was very low health, and I think Neo was about to kill them. I think that kill came through after the round had ended. So 5v4, almost a 5v3. I don't think that was necessary, especially when Jalen was on the objective as well. So pretty much Sour team versus Sanguine. Sour team looked very dominant. Nino was pretty much untouchable on anything he played, whether it was Bomb King or Maeve. Jalen was pretty much silent the entire time until Game 3 came around when he played the con. He was able to get the ults. The only reason I believe that was like, you know, as quote unquote as loud as it was compared to the other 2 games from Jalen was because Flame Effects had set the storyline up for the casters to talk about the con alts coming from Jalen now. Flame Effects pretty much underperformed in Game 1 and Game 2. Game 3, he did okay on the Atlas, but it was still not enough, and it wasn't really up to par in my point of view. Purdue played Tyra 2 out of those 3 games. The only time he didn't play Tyra was when he had to play Leon. So Sour team was really all day, actually, even against Penta. And we'll talk about Penta beating Hype Unit here in a second. But Purdue and Sour team overall, they grabbed these Genos picks. They grabbed these Tyra picks. They're grabbing these Torvalds when it fits into their comp, and they really make the most of this damage amp meta with all of this aggression, and they really know how to do it well. And Sheepa has been the one flexing to the third DPS, and we'll get into that a little bit later because it goes into their matchup with a PPL team, and I will talk about that. So matchup number 2 was Penta versus Hype Unit. And this one was an interesting one because Hype Unit got taken the distance against the console team Cyclone yesterday. So does that make Hype Unit look bad, or does that make Cyclone look good? That was one of the questions I was asking yesterday. And today, I think it makes both of those scenarios true because it also is because Penta is really good. Penta is the best PML team by far, and that's been clearly proven. I know in the predictions video before the tournament even started, I personally think Sour Team's a better team. But now that, I watch these games and I'm looking more into different scenarios in my mind, and I'll get a little bit later into that, I think it worked out the perfect way. I think Penta winning the tournament was the best option for Sour Team, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But game 1 was on Stone Keep. Round 1, Hype have offensive comp in a Khan Atlas. Khan is being played by William, and the problem with William being in this lineup is that if they go with this double off-tank composition, it's very hard for William to find any success because he's a main tank, and I don't care if he disagrees with me, and I don't care whoever disagrees with me. William, I don't think, and they mentioned this on broadcast, if you go with these double off-tank compositions and your main tank has to play an off-tank, do they play it like an off-tank normally would, or do they play it the off-tank as a main tank? That's the mentality that William needs to understand, that he has that main tank mentality while playing an off-tank. And I think that's really shown here in this set against Penta because he just wasn't as aggressive as maybe Tay was on the Con in game 3 or anyone else in this situation. Really bad example because people are going to meme this, but if you look at a console player, the Legacy, right, or Trenzik from Elevate, Legacy's from Flashpoint. If you look at those two players, they came into this league as, Trenzik came in as a main tank. Legacy came in as more of an off-tank because he had transitioned from DPS. Trenzik came straight in as a main tank, right? And now they can both play off-tank and main tank. And there's some other people that can do that as well within the PML, PPL, and PCL, respectfully. The problem is that Legacy, when he plays off-tank, he can play it like an off-tank. And when he plays main tank, he can play it like a main tank. The same goes for Trenzik. Trenzik can play Khan as aggressively as a normal Khan player. And he can play Inara as passively or as aggressively as a main tank player would play that Inara. And William just doesn't show that here, especially in game 1. They get 4-0'd. In game 2, they get 4-0'd as again. But this time, Williams on the Inara, so a little bit more comfortability for him with his play style. But unfortunately, Stigma on the Shaolin, he was doing everything he could on the Serpent Beach game 2 with that Shaolin. He was going against a pretty decent lineup that he could do a lot against, like a Ruckus, a Barrack, a big head hitbox from Pip. The problem is that Simsalou is insane on Pip. Round 1, right out the gate, Simsalou was popping off. I think he got a triple kill right at the beginning, and he had a part of the next 2 that fell for them as well. So he played extravagant all day, really. And he pip ulted 2 times in the first round in that last 40-50 feet of the payload push. So morale boost coming through clutch for him, but it wasn't as he didn't have as much morale boost at the very beginning of that match. They were able to push the payload in the first round to gain that 2-0 lead. And he pit vaulted, like I said, 2 times in that last like 50 feet of ending that payload push. So Simsalou was going absolutely crazy. He was hitting 3-man chickens. He was hitting, I think, a 4-man chicken. He hit a couple 2s, and he hit some solos to focus out the Inara as well off of her cooldown. The one chicken I want to point out was he 3-man pit vaults on the staircase towards Waterfall, and only gets one of them killed, and then the rest of Hype collapses on Pip, and Sims should die there, and he doesn't. And part of that is because of his Moxie in his loadout. Part of that is also because of the lifesteal coming through, and a big part of that was Excentra coming through with that huge dome shield ultimate, coming through with the barrack. And it was huge. And that's also another thing. Excentra, you wouldn't even realize that he was substituting for their main player, their main roster frontline in Ovum. Like, Ovum's better than Excentra. And that is scary to realize. Oh my goodness, what could Penta do with Ovum if they're doing this with Excentra? He looks like he belongs in the lineup and no one would ever notice. I mean, it's crazy. He has very good ult management all day today, yesterday as well, but mostly today against these other top PML teams. He's had really good ult management. He's made some very clutch plays. He's had some nice body blocks, and he's done what he's needed to do, as well as Crunchy, whatever you want to call him. His Makoa play today against Sour Team, but mostly against Hype Team, just outstanding, getting these awesome dredge anchors, focusing out the targets that he needs to focus out, especially ones, a lot of people say, oh, hook the squishies. Okay, well, you hook a squishy that has a great escape like Maeve or something, and it gets it's just as difficult as maybe killing a tank. The tank's going to stand there and soak up a lot of that damage after you grab him with the anchor. But so is like you grab a Maeve, the Maeve's just going to gone. So he was playing it very well. Couple times against Sour Team though. On that Bazaar map, I believe that was Game 4. Yes, Game 4, the Bazaar map. Sour Team was playing against the Ancient Rage perfectly with that CC control. He was using half shell, so he doesn't have that CC immunity during Ancient Rage. So every time that got popped, he got hit with Damba ults, he got hit with stuns, he got hit with all types of CC from the side of Sour. But Penta, Sour Team beats Sanguine 3-0, and then Penta beats Hype Unit 3-0 in a dominating fashion. It was a 4-0, 4-0, and then a 4-1. So they only allowed Hype Unit to take 1 point the entire set, and that was very, very dominating for Penta. Pretty much Tay showed up and played well. Overall, Tay played well. Stigma and Poison were no match for the constant pressure being put on them from Penta. And that was huge because on that Frog Isle game, you have Stigma playing this Kinessa, and Penta 4-man dives him in the backline. Just 4-man sends it. And as soon as everyone turns around to help Stigma, the entire Penta squad is just like, all right, we did what we needed them to do. They backed all the way up. They're pretty much at their spawn door. Inara's by herself on point. Let's go farm. And that's what they did, and they were able to gain the point back. And Simsalou pretty much just walked all over Hype with any champion he played. So it was very difficult to deal with Simsalou for anybody in this tournament so far. Let's talk about Penta versus Sour Team now in the finals of the play-in bracket. Whoever wins this will have to go and face Not Vincere, and whoever loses will have to face Ninjas in Pajamas. So game 1 went to Warder's Gate, and Sheepa was on Vivian and not Eevee this time. We did see him play Eevee against Sanguine, and that was interesting because you don't see Sheepa playing damage as much anymore. It's been a long time since he played that Eevee. And he admitted in the interview after that it wasn't a good Eevee game in his mind, and I agree. So he was playing Vivian, And this was interesting because they went with a triple DPS composition again. They had the Barrack solo tank again. They had the Genos. They had the Eevee, Maeve, and Vivian. On the other side, you have a Ruckus, Khan, and a Nara with a solo damage Tyra for Penta. So Penta, it was a triple tank for Penta and a triple DPS for Sour Team. Sour Team ended up losing this game 4-3, but I think it was mainly because Vivian and was getting focused. By the way, Erase went, I think it was, let me see, I have it written down here. Erase ended up going 3-12 on Tyra this game. And he picked it up. He was insane afterwards in the rest of the games. This ended up being a 3-1 in favor of Penta. But this was huge. Because to me, I'm like, yo, they keep gassing Erase up right now, but he just went 3-12. But he did do his job correctly. He did go 3-12, but he was putting out those Hunter's marks, and that was basically his job. You're playing on Warder's Gate as well, so the Fire Bomb really kind of controls that objective, especially if they're in those little cubbies to the left and right. So, his job was pretty much throw the fire on point, get the marks out, and let your tanks do as much damage as they can. And you have some pretty good tanks for damage. You have Ruckus and Khan, two of the best offensive tanks there are. And Vivian pretty much got shut down late game. Now, Vivian did have the Wrecker and was trying to go through this Ruckus and Khan. But with a Wrecker on the side of Penta with that Hunter's mark, Vivian stands no chance. And, they went down 0-2 at the beginning of this game. Then they brought it back 2-2. And after that, they just pretty much hit the gas pedal and didn't let Sour Team breathe after that. They just pushed with aggression and forced the defense to just wither away from Sour Team. Game 2 went down to Serpent Beach. And this was a 4-2 in favor of Penta again. This was interesting because they went triple DPS for Sour Team again with the Shaolin, Tyra, and Maeve. These are good picks. Perdo was on the Maeve this time. Ninu was on the Shaolin, just showing his flexibility. Sheepa was on the Tyra, so even if Sheepa dies a bunch of times, as long as he gets those marks and fire out like Erase did in the game before. And they had the Barrack Genos combo for the solo tank and the triple DPS Luminary buff again. But for the other side, they banned out Cassie and Khan this time. Mako and Atlas were banned out from the side of Penta. And Penta, I think, had the very, very dominant draft here. They took the Torvald first with a Leon. They did end up picking the Eevee, and Simsaloo did great on the Eevee, but he wasn't the primary focus for Torvald's bubbles. Those went to Leon, because you can only imagine having to deal with triple DPS, these squishy targets, as Leon with that big burst damage Eminence build, off of cooldown reduction and all of that good stuff in there, paired with a big old bubble from Torvald to damage amp that. So Erase really stepped it up that game, had the Tor bubble, was moving with extra speed, had extra damage, was getting his abilities back off cooldowns, off eliminations, off of hitting his Eminences. So that was a dominating match for Erase. They were able to take that 4-2. They pushed in with a 2-0 commanding offensive push there at the beginning. Sims's Eevee was pretty much controlling the back line, kind of forced Sour Team out of position so that the Leon Torv could really do as much damage as they wanted. Ninu did have some good plays on the Shaolin. He hit a nice Heat Haze in round 2 to bring them back and help them capture the point. But pretty much after that, they had the defense on the side of Penta. Sour Team once again snagged another point away while Accenture was trying to Ash ult, but couldn't land on the objective time in time. Couldn't land on the objective in time to force the overtime. So Penta was able to snag another capture away, but it was defended once again. And then the double tank really showed that it was better, since Sour had to wait for Zarini to get back to start trying to capture that point. And all through this fight, if Penta just killed Zarini, no one else on that team, you have Tyra, Shaolin, Maeve, and Genos, they can't really sustain long enough with a Genos heal, especially on the objective against even a solo Ashe, let alone Torvald being there as well. So the double tank really showed that it was better than the solo tank in that last round capture situation there. Game 3 went to Jaguar Falls, and this was a 4-3. Sour actually won this game. This looked a lot better from them. They banned out the Pip and the Torvald, so that's 2 big power picks that Penta has played this tournament and pretty much dominated with. They've done it a few games already. Sheepa was back on his front lines. He was playing Khan, and this is where they shined. And this is very important because going into the PPL matchups, I will mention this again. They ran triple DPS 2 times in a row. This time they run the double tank, the quote-unquote normal 2-1 composition here, and they're able to snag a win away. Penta, by the way, drafted a Furia, and they were using a Solar Blessing Furia here. Sheepa, again, was back on the off-tank. He played Khan. Genos illuminated a Sky, and Ninu just popped off on this Sky, especially very early on in the game. He looks very comfortable on this Sky, even late game when these Illuminates come out. And that really allows Perdo to do as much damage as he can on the Tyra with that hunting party. So you have a Sky running around with a Genos Luminary mark and Tyra marks as well, and he was putting out massive amounts of damage. He was melting Accentra on Anara in like a matter of a second, maybe not even 2 seconds. So he was doing a lot of work with that. Once Sky started to get focused a lot, Perdo really stepped up. There was round 3, it was 99% to 99% on the capture objective. Sky tried to hit a flank, throws out a time bomb. They were able to avoid that time bomb, kill Sky, and they looked like they were about to win this team fight. But Perdo just pops the crossfire, walks in, gets a triple kill, and is able to sustain themselves, and they ended up capturing that. Then they zone out in round 4 with the time bomb, keeps Accentra, who was playing Anara again, on the objective away from the rest of the team because he threw the time bomb on Jag's side and he threw it through the doorway of Dark. So that kept the 4 other members of Penta trying to get in there, and they weren't able. Remember, they're playing with Solar Blessing. It's hard to try and throw that through the wall to the objective point in that situation. So they weren't able to get there while the rest of Sour team was basically just melting Accentra. By the time they got there, the objective was in overtime, and they were able to zone them out for that last half a second. Game 4 went to Bazaar. We talked about this a little bit early on. Early kills from Penta, but Sour team fought back because the Drogos was pretty much firing for free at that time. This ended up changing, though, as the Vivian being played by Erase was pretty much uncontested the entire game. No one really put any pressure on him. So once again, Erase stepped up big and was able to put a lot of damage out. Once the Record 3 came out, the big hooks from Cruncy, it started to go downhill for Sour team, and that's when Penta beat Sour 4-1 and closed out the set 3-1. So the Leon Torv combo was pretty hard to deal with. Tyra played a huge part in this as well today for all teams, pretty much, win or lose. But now let's talk about the finals. The main bracket, the final bracket, whatever you want to call it, with the top 6 PPL teams. So in order from 1st seed to 6th seed, it was Ninjas in Pajama, Nadas Vincere, Team Envy, and then it was Space Station Gaming, Kanga Esports, and Virtus Pro. And then coming in after that would be Penta and Sour team being the 7th and 8th seed. So the way that the bracket, I'm going to throw it up on the screen here, is Ninjas in Pajamas versus Sour team. Now, this is an interesting matchup, and I'll tell you why. I mentioned a few little tidbits here and there, earlier just now. But here's the reason. Sour team played triple DPS. They used Genos a ton of times, right? The problem with Sour team is that they, in my opinion, are not a good triple DPS team. They can make it work by putting cheap on things like Tyra and Vivian because those aren't as difficult for someone who's been playing off-tank predominantly 90% of the time for a long time now to have to transition back into that DPS role rather than trying to play Eevee, right? So I think they weren't trying to show off exactly their top tier strats. They knew that it was going to be a difficult matchup, whether they go up against NIP or Na'Vi. And they probably figured that NIP for Sour Team is probably the easier match for them. The reason why is because Sheepa and Perdeaux, they know the players from NIP personally. They've played with them before on the same team and against them. And here they are going up against them again. So they kind of know, some inside information about them maybe. I don't know. That's just what I think. Another thing is if they do end up going triple DPS, that's things that NIP does a lot. So those can be conflicting picks, and that could be, Sour Team possibly doing something in the draft to throw NIP off or vice versa. So I think will be a really good matchup to watch. I think Sour Team can steal one game away from NIP. If NIP plays like they were before when they were undefeated, I think that they run through Sour Team. But I'm going to give Sour Team the benefit of the doubt. I think Sheepa and Perdeaux and Ninu, a young fragger in himself, I think they can pull out one game against NIP. But I have NIP. These are best of 5s in the first round. Semis and finals are best of 7. So I'm going to take NIP over Sour Team 3-1. For Space Station Gaming versus Kanga Esports, this is an interesting matchup again because they kind of play the same things together. But big points for each team. Kanga, in my opinion, Chronix is a better DPS than he is at frontline or anything else. But he can do that very well at the top levels of this scene. So if they need to get very diverse in their draft, they can, because Chronix can allow them to triple tank or double tank or triple DPS or double support. So they can get really, really crazy in this draft and kind of throw Space SSG off guard. But big factor for SSG is, yes, SSG came into the PPL, expecting to be the number 1 team. They show up to HRX and have a great debut, and they almost take down Envy. And if they would have beaten Envy, they would have been in the World Championship against Na'Vi, and they, essentially lost to the champions. But they didn't do, they didn't do so hot in the league. But they're a top 4 team, maybe even a top 3 team. If they continue on the same path. But the big thing about SSG, just like HRX, they show up when it's tournament time. When it's, hey, single elimination, they show up. Now, I know PPL, they're in the same building, it's the same LAN environment, but still, this invitational is basically bragging rights, a little bit of scout work, and some extra money, right? So SSG doesn't have a huge championship to play for right now, but they play better in tournament bracket lands. So I've got SSG beating Kanga, but I think this is going to be a 3-2. I think Kanga takes them the distance, and it could go either way. I lean towards Kanga a little bit, but mainly going to say SSG here. Next up, we have Naz Vincier versus Penta. I think Navi's really good. Really good. They're arguably the best team next to NIP, maybe even better than them. They're the favorite to win this bracket, actually, even being the number 2 seed. But Penta's really good. The big thing about Penta is that, yes, they have Accentra subbing for Ovum, but even with Accentra, like I said, they look really good. They look like a well-oiled machine, like Dolson has been saying, but they play so well together. They know who's where, what's going to happen, who's going to do what on their team, and when. That way they can combine their best efforts together. And they know how to time each other's cooldowns, let alone their own. So they play really well. Problem is that Na'Vi does everything Penta does, only better. So I think Penta might be able to take a game or two off of Na'Vi. I'm going to give it to Na'Vi 3-1. I think Na'Vi, who's been together longer than Penta has, are going to shut this down. Next up, we have Team Envy versus Virtus Pro. This is an interesting matchup because Virtus Pro and Team Envy are kind of the same in my eyes this season so far, right? You have Virtus Pro, who started off the season playing bad, all right? For a lack of better words, they were playing bad because they needed to mesh. These are players from all over the world, different teams, different corners, different backgrounds, whatever it may be. And they were, they needed time to build some chemistry and gain some experience together and get things flowing in a nice, meshy way, okay? And they did that. Then they started to play really good. But then towards the end of the season, they started to play bad again. So they're consistently bad more than they are consistently good in my eyes right now. But they have potential. I think some of the players on their team have limited champ pools in this current meta, and that could be their downfall. But on the other side, we have Team Envy. And Team Envy, coming off the World Championship, supposed to come in here and knock everyone off their feet again. And that's not what happened. They ended up climbing back. They got to that 3rd seed. But Team Envy struggled at the beginning. Horribly, too. They will admit that. Probably. But Team Envy, as history has shown, they adapt so well. They adapt from set to set. They adapt from day to day. They adapt from week to week. They adapt from game to game in the same match. They adapt mid-game super well. And I think that's going to be the main focus for them tomorrow. How well are they going to be able to adapt to teams like VP? If they move on and they have to face Na'Vi, how are they going to, approach that differently and adapt to that rather than trying to do the same thing they did against VP? So that's a big thing about Envy, is they're able to adapt. They're able to do it fast and efficiently and successfully. So I have Team Envy beating Virtus Pro 3-0, but I would not be surprised if Virtus Pro take 1, 2, or maybe even win this. But I personally think Team Envy is going to be able to adapt very well and take this 3-0 right here. I think VP will be a little underwhelmed with the amount of pressure that Envy is going to push into them. But hey, what do I know, right? So my name is Blue. That's been your day 2 recap of the MSI and a little preview of tomorrow's games. Don't forget to check out the stream and broadcast on mixer.com/paladinsgame. And you can also, by the way, we have another challenge bracket up, and you can do your own predictions. You can build your own bracket from the beginning to the end and submit that, or you can actually vote match per match who's going to win. So that's a huge thing. The link will be in the description below, as well as our full coverage Paladins MSI page on the consolecorner.co website. That'll be in the link in the description as well. And also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter @ConsoleProNews. Keep grinding, everyone.